and welcome to Power Speaking Live. It's so fun to see so many familiar faces and names in the participant panel. I am Carrie Beckstrom, the host of this monthly series and the CEO of Power Speaking Incorporated. Today, we're going to be talking about how to develop, communicate, and promote your personal brand. And I can honestly say that I thoroughly enjoy every single one of these Power Speaking Live events. I've been particularly excited for this one because it has such broad applicability. You may be an independent consultant or have your own business. You may have a role within a broader organization, or you may be in transition between jobs. No matter where you are in your career journey, having a strong personal brand will help you move to the next level, whatever that may represent for you. Now, with that backdrop, we'd like to learn a little bit more about you. So we're going to kick things off with a brief poll question that Andrew's going to display for us.
All right, that poll is now live.
So we'd just like to know which of these best applies to you. Where are you in your personal branding journey? Are you just starting out? Perhaps you have a really well-established brand, you're just looking to refine it, or somewhere in between. Okay, so we've got a mix with the majority of you being somewhere in the middle. Thank you. That insight really helps us. What the other thing we'd like you to know from you, and we asked you to reflect on this question as you were joining, is what have you found to be most challenging in building your own personal brand? Would you be willing to share some of your challenges with us? Either now or as we go through this session, because we're going to be touching on this obviously from a number of different angles. So we look forward to your input. This is intended to be an interactive conversation. So at any point, if you want to share your insights, you have questions for our expert panelists, please let us know. So with that, I will introduce our expert panelists. Joining us today, we have Amy Powell, whom I had the pleasure of working with for many years at ADP in mutual leadership roles. Amy is currently the Vice President of Leader Development for the Marcus Buckingham Company. In this role, she leads a team of expert, strength-based executive coaches, facilitators, content creators, and this is all done in an effort to help individuals and organizations activate their unique talent. So clearly, Amy is very uniquely qualified for this discussion. Amy has over 2 decades of leadership experience in both the learning space and leadership development space, including 10 years of global leadership roles in marketing and sales. Thank you so much for being with us today, Amy.
Thanks so much, Carrie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Also joining us is Kristen Lincoln she's the CEO of Livewire. Kristen and I became acquainted through a mutual friend, gosh, I think 3 or 4 years ago. And it was at a time in which we were both considering a very significant career change. Needless to say, Kristen's moved to go out on her own and start her own business, Livewire, which is a leadership development and executive coaching firm, has been a smashing success. Kristen was a corporate executive and is an MBA Stanford, has her MBA from Stanford, and she draws on her expertise and education to help her clients develop skills in emotional intelligence, tackling critical conversations, and helping her clients develop and coach others. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kristen.
Glad to be here.
And last but not least, we have Morgan Wider, founder of Wider Style. How's that for a strong personal brand? And Morgan, I was thinking about this morning. I think we met right around this same time last year.
It's only been a year?
It's only been a year. And I have to say, I was instantly drawn by your dynamic presence. Morgan is a wardrobe stylist and speaker, and she helps executives, entrepreneurs, and college students help to build wardrobes that reflect and embody their personal brand and convey confidence and competence. Morgan is also the author of the best-selling book, The Worthy Wardrobe, Your Guide to Style, Shopping, and Soul. And we dropped the link in chat. I encourage you to check it out. She's also the host of the podcast, The Worthy Reveal. So clearly, we have quite a bit of expertise at our disposal that we're going to take full advantage of over the next hour. And I see some of you have added some inputs to chat. So I'll be taking a look at those and make sure we address your thoughts as we go through our discussion. To kick things off, I think it would be helpful if each of you could share just a little bit more about your background, especially as it relates to this topic. You want to start us off, Kristen?
Sure. So like Carrie said, I am currently the CEO of Livewire, which is a leadership development firm. And what we do is a kind of a combination of one-on-one executive coaching. We also do team coaching and also offer a number of different training programs to help people develop their leadership skills. So that's what we do, including some personal branding workshops and things like that. I come from this topic really from the place of product marketing. So I have a background, I was in marketing and communications for many, many years in the corporate world. So spent a lot of time on branding and product branding in particular. And what I realized is that there are so many similarities in the space of personal branding. So I really come at it from that standpoint of stealing, if you will, a little bit, some of the shamelessly stealing things that work in the product branding world for personal branding. And there's a lot of crossover, and we're going to learn a lot more about that today.
We sure are. We're going to touch on that in just a bit. All right. Thank you so much. What about you, Amy?
I've been fascinated with the uniqueness of human beings since as long as I can remember, and spent my entire career in education and coaching, and then later in corporate education. And when I think about the topic of personal branding, to me, it is so inextricably connected with the individual's uniqueness. And how do you take your passions and what you love and turn that into contributions that other people can trust that they come to you for again and again and again. So love this topic, and notice a couple people, thank you for sharing in chat some of those challenges, because your uniqueness is the answer as far as I'm concerned.
Well said. Well said. And Morgan?
Yeah, so I come from 10 years experience in corporate retail. So I was a merchant who loved product, but didn't quite really understand how important clothing was to our personal brand until I became my own business owner. And we'll talk more about that. But as an image consultant now, I work with companies and individuals on how do you create alignment with your wardrobe, your closet, so that you feel good every day. When you feel good, you do good, and you perform well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So I'm going to just take a look at some of the comments that folks have shared. Katie, one of my biggest challenges is developing an authentic personal brand as a more mature woman in an organization with majority of younger staff and ageist society. Oh my gosh, excellent point. So we'll be touching on that. David, biggest challenge is balancing building a personal brand and not coming off as arrogant and self-serving as I do it. Self-promotion is uncomfortable. We will definitely be touching on that. Would love to hear how to maintain consistency in my brand when engaging with very different audiences. Excellent. And Mary, challenges with my personal branding. How do I articulate my brand without sounding too salesy? So similar to David's comment. And I am new in a fully remote organization. Conveying my brand when interactions are all remote and less frequent, there are not organic hallway interactions. Oh, this is providing tremendous fodder. So we're going to get into all of these. Let's start off. I'm going to pick up on something you mentioned, Kristen. You mentioned that your background is in marketing and you have a lot of experience in branding products. And I think we all can easily identify with the power of branding when we think about products like Nike or Patagonia or Apple. Can you expand a little bit on how applying this concept to an individual is important and beneficial?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think again, I think the benefits are very similar to, the benefits that Nike, let's say, gets out of dumping a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of energy into building their brand. They do that for a reason, right? And one reason is as simple as name recognition, right? When we hear the name Nike, we, because of all this energy and time that they've kind of put into building their brand, we kind of know what that means, right? We know who they are, we know what they stand for, we know what problem they can solve for us, what product they have. So it's very similar in personal branding, right? That when your name, like the thing to ask yourself, when your name comes up in a meeting and you're not there, what do people say? What do they think? What do they feel? What's the emotion they get from that? Do they have any understanding or feeling or recognition of your name, right? So that's one element of, one thing that you want to do in personal branding is just let people know who you are and what you stand for, right? Also, this thing about understanding what the product is and how it can help you, right? When you are out there in the world looking for something, a product to buy, you want to understand like what are the options and who can help me the best. So that's another thing in personal branding that you want to be able to answer that question. Like when a problem inside an organization comes up, do people think of you as someone who can help? Right. So all of these things kind of flow together. Very, very similar, I would say, the benefits.
Wonderful. So building on that, you talked about the brand really defining who you are and what you stand for. A recent Harvard Business Review article defined the personal brand as your uniqueness, of course, your values, and your contributions. Would you, Amy, agree with that definition? How do you think about personal brand? And in answering that, actually answer that, and then I want to get to one of the panelists' comments, or I'm sorry, participants' comments.
I absolutely do agree. And I love that, that trio, right? One, your uniqueness, what is true about you? And inside of that uniqueness, I encourage you to pay attention to fulfillment as well, not just what you're good at, but what energizes you, what fascinates you, what can't you stop thinking about or experimenting with, even when you want to. You think about the idea of a renewable resource, those natural things that you find fascinating and fulfilling. There's such an important point about your uniqueness. And I call that out because sometimes it's tempting for us to try to build our brand from the outside in. Who do I think people want a leader to be or an events manager to be in XYZ? And how can I make myself more like that, right? But this idea that they're talking about, that who you actually are, and I would add who you are at your most alive and fulfilled, is a really important part of intelligence for your brand. Your values are so huge. If you haven't gone through an exercise of identifying your top 5 values, I so strongly encourage you to do that, because that says what matters to me, what do I stand for, what do I believe in? And when you look at combining those two things with the idea of contribution, right? I want to take what is most unique and effective about myself and apply that in an area that resonates with my values and turn that into contribution. And I think, right, that's a very great summary of an inside out approach to personal brand.
Thank you. And I especially appreciate that you added the point about fulfillment in really bringing into focus your uniqueness and what specifically is most fulfilling and rewarding to you. Morgan, how do you think one's personal style relates to personal branding, and how do you define personal style?
Well, there's a scientific fact that the human brain makes about 55% of their judgments of if someone's likable, trustworthy, knowledgeable based on what people wear. So your race, your gender, your age are things that you can't control how people think about you in those first impressions, but you can control the majority of the narrative by the choices you make when you get dressed every morning. So when you're aware of your personal brand and what you want to be known for and your uniqueness, it's critical that your wardrobe and your image are in alignment with that, because that's what people see. And as humans, we are visual creatures. So sometimes we think that if we know our stuff and we do the work and we're the people that are known for what we do, that's enough. But people do business, people they know, like, and trust. And if they don't notice you or you don't look the part of what you do, then your personal brand is incredibly compromised. I work with so many. I was one of the very smart women who thought that all of that was only your work ethic mattered, but I was at the detriment of not being aware of how I showed up in the world.
Wonderful. This may be tough, but as it relates to personal style, do you have any advice for Katie? Katie was the one that mentioned one of my biggest challenges is developing an authentic personal brand as a more mature woman in an organization with majority of younger staff.
Thank you for sharing that. And to create vulnerability in the space, I really appreciate that. And I think I would encourage you when you're developing your personal style I talk about awareness, like who are you? And the more aware you are of your age, your body type, your weight, your lifestyle, few of us have the body type of a quote unquote typical 20-year-old, don't try to dress like that, right? Or if you know that you aren't going to spend hours blow drying your hair every morning, don't go get a haircut that is the trendy haircut that you can't maintain. Finding what fits and honors you in your current state and your shape and your style, but is still relevant and in the current market and retail landscape. Just because you bought a pair of shoes 20 years ago and you thought they never went out of style, that doesn't mean that they are still relevant and current. So balancing what works for you, but still what's current, will show that you are comfortable in your own skin and that you're not trying to play in the 20-year-old game.
Thank you. Yeah, I think key there. And Kristen, were you going to add something?
I was just going to say, I think I love all of that advice is fantastic. And I also would just think about, what are the benefits that you bring as an older worker in the workplace, somebody who has all this experience and understands the culture and has a lot of connections probably within the organization, and who can you help connect to other people in the organization because of all that knowledge and experience. So really thinking about it, trying to like turn that thought on its head a little bit of, it's not a detriment, right? It's not a drawback, it's a feature. It's a feature. So how can you make it work for you?
Yeah.
Exactly. And we talked about, Amy explained that part of one's personal brand is your contributions. As someone who's a more seasoned in their profession, you can draw on countless contributions that can provide value to others. So in my experience, and I'm sure you all can relate to this, really getting in touch with defining your own personal brand requires a lot of self-reflection and introspection. And it's not easy for everyone. So what advice do you have for that process and really crystallizing your uniqueness, your values, and your contributions? Amy?
The first thing I'd say is look for some things that can help you find the language to describe who you are at your unique best. I think David had mentioned earlier, the concept of bragging is so awkward for us, right? When we think about it as, right, oh, I'm comparing myself against other people, and right, it has all kinds of negative connotations, so much so that we obsess about what's wrong with us and we don't even have a language to talk about what's right with us. And, first I'd say it's important to understand what you really want to bring and contribute to the world. It's not self-glorifying to offer that up to other people. It's actually generous to say, gosh, you've got your back against the wall. I'm really good at brainstorming. I'm very resourceful and creative. I can help you with that, right? I'm not saying, ooh, look at me, look at what I can do. I'm saying, here's what I can bring. Again, back to that idea of value. I love, and coming from a place of deep personal bias, I'm a huge fan of strengths assessments as a good starting point to get some language that describes you, that rings true for you. And so I work with the Standout Assessment. Personally, you can see there's a link. This assessment is free for the world. So I encourage you to try that, or something like it, or a combination of them. And when you see your results, focus on finding what are those phrases that really energize you and light you up, and use those as a starting point to start to describe your uniqueness, right? We already talked about thinking about your top values. So in other words, look for an easy starting place.
Excellent. And I think really having clarity on that language that you want to use to describe your uniqueness also helps to ensure you're consistent in the way in which you project and promote your brand. Morgan, Kristen, anything you want to add?
Yeah, similar to Amy, I'm all about assessments, and with my clients and in my workshops, I created this concept called authentically appropriate. And so when I'm working with clients and we're building a wardrobe, I need to know it's authentic for you so that you can sustain it and it feels like you've all probably gotten a gift from an in-law or a sweater, you put it on, you're like, this doesn't feel like me. That's what's going on, is not authentic to you. And then what's appropriate for your audience. So there's, like Amy, my assessment kind of, when I work with clients, has a whole lot of adjectives and verbs of what feels good for you and then what does your audience require of you. And when you are authentic to yourself, you show up in a way that feels good and you're not self-abandoning. And then when you show up with a way that what your audience needs from you in your image, then you are being aware of what your audience is expecting. You can meet their needs. So if you authentically feel like wearing sweatpants to a big sales meeting, yeah, that's authentic, but it's not appropriate for the occasion, and vice versa. So finding the balance of what works for you and who you are at all times, but not, like Kevin mentioned, not feeling like you have to hide who you are, and making sure that your audience is getting what they need and expect from you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I want to share a quick story, and then really want to call out Kevin's comment on this point about authenticity. So I've had the luxury of being the host at several women in tech conferences around the globe, and the very first one I emceed, for whatever I was laboring over what I was going to wear, just laboring. It was my very first time being on a big stage since COVID. So I felt out of practice. We all can identify with that. And I ended up pulling out this dress that I hadn't worn in years. And I never felt fully comfortable in it. One, because just how it draped on my body, I constantly was fidgeting with it. And every single picture that was taken of me on that stage was awful. I didn't look comfortable in my own skin. Fast forward to this one I emceed in Boston. I chose to wear my absolute favorite sweater. And the pictures were radically different. It was just so evident that in one, I just wasn't my authentic self. In the other, I was literally feeling super comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah, Carrie, one thing to even mention with like COVID, I think there's also the awareness of like who we were 3 years ago and who we are now is not the same. And that's okay. Like your closet, it's all about honoring where you are in the present moment. And that dress might have been great 3 or 4 years ago, but our bodies have changed, our lifestyles, our mentalities, how we want to be seen in the world has changed. So that could be why that dress just doesn't work now. Let it go and something that's good. And right. And to Amy's point, does it still fit? Those are all questions that a lot of us are.
Oh, okay. So Kevin, thank you so much for this comment. And I see a lot of people are adding on because it really resonates. Kevin says, Kevin M. Yates, nice to see you here, Kevin. When I realized that leading with authenticity is what strengthened my personal brand and propelled it forward, I realized the importance of living in authenticity because living in duality is too much work. Well said. Well said. Okay, so let's say we've been successful in doing that introspection, that reflection. We have real clarity on our language and how we want to define our personal brand. What next? Kristen, you teach workshops on this. Tell us a little bit about the process.
Yeah. So I just want to really acknowledge that point about authenticity, because I do think sometimes when we ask people to be more intentional, right? Be more intentional about what you want your personal brand to be, because the fact is you have one and you may not like it. You may not like what it is, but people absolutely think something about you when you walk out of a room. Whatever that is currently kind of your personal brand. And so if you would like to have a little bit more control over that, have it be more accurate and more authentic about who you really think you are, That's why you need to take this time and reflection to find out, who am I? And a lot of us don't even take the time to do that work. Like, it's hard for us to say, I don't know who I am authentically, right? So do that work first. And then it becomes so much easier. Like Kevin said, it's so much easier to put it out there because you're just living your authentic self. But I will say, like, the biggest thing is you got to communicate it, right? Once you have settled on what it is, you have to tell people about it, right? It's not just going to magically happen. There's a reason Nike spends so much money on, on branding. So there are a lot of ways to do it, but I think many of us probably know people who are in organizations who are very talented, very good at their jobs, but aren't getting promoted, aren't getting recognition, that sort of thing. So you really do need to invest some time in getting the word out in a lot of different ways. And there are so many ways that you can do this inside a workplace, as well as if you're an entrepreneur. But I'll just talk a little bit about inside a workplace. From a marketing CMO mindset, I would come at this and say, I have this great product. Kevin is the product that we're trying to get out there in the world, right? How do we do that? What are our channels? I might think about, in the product world, a magazine ad, a billboard, social media posts, that sort of thing. But you have these channels inside your organization too. So as an example, meetings. Meetings are a channel where you can show up a certain way in these meetings and communicate a certain thing, certain message about who you are and what your brand is. So be thoughtful about that, right? That's a place where you can communicate your brand. Email communications, another place, another way that you can communicate your brand. LinkedIn is probably more of an obvious place, but that's another way that you can communicate your brand. I would love it if you guys, you could even throw into chat, other ways that you can think of that you can communicate your brand inside an organization. And I think we have a little worksheet that I have pulled together that just helps you expand your thought about how do you get this message out in the world.
Great. And many people mentioned the discomfort with promoting oneself. Amy, I think you had some great advice for that, is think about that differently. This isn't about promoting yourself. This is about communicating how you can help and contribute to others. Anything you want to add on that point, Kristen, for people that find this uncomfortable?
Yeah, and I'm sure if Amy wants to add too, there's, I think this is a thing. It's about self-awareness. This is what I really think it is. This is, I think all great leaders, one of the best characteristics of a really good leader is that they are very self-aware. And so this is part of a self-awareness exercise, is you figuring out what does set you apart, how you can help, and letting people know that you can help, right? I almost feel like it's a job requirement for senior people in the organization to share their personal brand, right? They need to help people see what leaders in this company look like, sound like, how they behave, right? So I think, again, it's a little bit of a mind shift, right? And if it feels uncomfortable for you and it feels like you're over promoting, listen to your instinct on that, I would say. But also, really think about, am I just being shy? Am I just not, stepping up the way I need to step up? That's what I would say.
Thank you. Building on that, and Morgan, I'd love your input because you and I had a brief exchange on this. I came across a Forbes article just a few weeks ago that was really, really disconcerting. The title was, "New Study Finds that Black Employees Are Penalized for Self-Promotion." The study results indicate that Black employees who engage in self-promotion are rated less favorably on job performance and person organization fit measures compared to white, Hispanic, and Asian employees. A really, really disturbing data, especially when us women are told so frequently how important it is to advocate for ourselves. One of the things that says to me is also being mindful of the importance of allyship and advocating others and serving as sponsors for others. I don't know what thoughts you have, Morgan.
It's so loaded. That article was, it hurt because it was so true. I think Carrie, you mentioned like, yes, as women, we're taught to advocate for ourselves and speak up for ourselves, but then on parsing the race element, I often got feedback in corporate America as a Black woman, I was too intimidating, or because my voice was deeper than my white female bosses who was chipper and higher, I came across as more serious or unengaged. And so like all of that lack of awareness of how race dynamics in America still happen in corporate America or in anywhere really, we can't look at this in a silo. And so the elements of building your brand often have to factor in race. A quick story, I was at a lawyers conference speaking, and this really tall, he looked like former President Obama, tall appellate court lawyer, Black man, said he had a really sexy, deep voice, but he told me that he often doesn't speak outside of the courtroom because he had to train himself to raise his voice pitch higher because as a 6'4" Black man, he was coming across as more intimidating. And so like all of those things, like he knew as part of his personal brand, what levers he had to maneuver around to make white majority court or the law feel more comfortable. And so unfortunately, that is an awareness that people of color and women have to be aware of all of the time of your gender, your race, your gender identity, your sexual orientation. What are the levers and how much of those things you want to show and what places that you feel safe being your authentic self. But
Yeah.
yes, sponsorship is also an incredibly important thing for anyone to have. And that goes back to, I think it was David's point. The more people know you, the better people know you as a whole person in your workplace, the more that they know your interests, they can then advocate for you on your behalf when you're not in those rooms either.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. The one little nugget that I did find encouraging is there's no evidence to suggest that there's backlash when you promote your personal brand through social media. So they found it promotion within the organization, but there's no evidence if you're doing it through LinkedIn, Instagram, et cetera. So to me, that underscores the point you were making, Kristen, about ensuring that you're using multiple channels to communicate and promote your brand. So building on that, do you think there's any difference, situational circumstances that modify how you think about defining and promoting your personal brand? For example, is there a difference to doing that if you're a role within an organization versus, owning your own business as an example? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say there is, I think there's just some different things to think about, right? I think that when you're working inside a company, if you want to be a leader there, I think there is definitely an expectation, right? That you are aware of and representing the values of the organization, right? So I think for sure being aware of them and is important. And also authenticity is still very important. So I encourage people to really look at what the existing values are, stated values in the organization, see which ones connect to you, which ones are also important to you. How can you link to them and how can you make them authentic to yourself? So for example, I will say most organizations kind of help in this way because unfortunately organizations are pretty non-descriptive about their values, right? So, if we did a show of hands, probably almost everybody here would say their big organization has integrity as one of their values, right? Well, okay, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. That could look different for a lot of people, but it's also general enough that you can probably connect yourself somehow to integrity and say, for me, integrity looks like this. This is the way I'm going to show up personally. This is how it looks for me to show up with integrity. So I think that's a very important thing to do. And it helps with you being able to be authentic and also representing the company. If you are an entrepreneur, I think it's almost a little bit more challenging because you are the business, right? In that case, you are the business. So everything you do is kind of representative of the organization. So I think it's even more important for you to do that. Who am I? What am I telling the world about what me and my organization will do for them? to make sure that you're willing and able to deliver on that. And kind of remember you're sort of always on stage if you're
Always.
the point person, right?
Yes. Yes. Great advice. Anything either of you want to add?
I think for me, I know firsthand what Kristen's talking about on both sides of being a former corporate employee and then now a business owner. I think the biggest shift for me is your audience. And so always being aware of who you're communicating with will also impact how you show up in your communication, your dress, your body language. Being true to who you are, again, it's always the core of authenticity. But when my audience shifts and I'm speaking to college students versus senior executives, my dress probably changes slightly. My communication style, my content changes slightly. So always being aware of, even in corporate America, what meeting channel we're going into is, again, the more you can meet your audience where they are, the more they are receptive to your personal brand and your own version of your own authenticity or your interpretations of whatever those values are.
Excellent. Yeah. Something also I'd just like to add, I was thinking about, Kristen, when you were describing the difference of defining and communicating your brand within an organization and the importance of that alignment. That also underscores the importance, if you're in the process of thinking about a job change, having that clarity on your own values and really doing your research to make sure that the place you choose to go to and contribute to are values that you truly honor authentically and can support. Because if that's not compatible, it's not going to be a good fit for a whole host of reasons. So on the subject of brands evolving, do any of you have a story you could share about how your own personal brand evolved over time?
I'm the prime example of what not to do. And I like, I'm laughing because this question is really for me. I spent 10 years in corporate retail. I still to this day, but loved clothes, went into corporate retail because I love to shop. And here's the kicker. I didn't feel confident in wearing the clothes that I had bought. I didn't feel confident in myself. I didn't feel confident being noticed. So I would have this closet I use my employee discount really well, but then would go into work. At the time, most of my career was working in men's department. So I was the only girl on these men's teams. So I would go and trying to dress like them, white t-shirt, jeans, and flip-flops in San Francisco. And so I thought that, again, my work mattered and I needed to act and think like the boys and in the team that I was in, and didn't want to draw any more attention to my femininity or my blackness or my curly hair. So I didn't wear clothes like these behind me into the office. And it wasn't, ironically, of course, in my business as an entrepreneur, I'm an image consultant. So of course, my brand and my image matters. I have to practice what I preach. But for any person inside or outside of an organization, at the time, I didn't know that my personal brand and my image mattered in those offices. Again, I thought that if I acted like everyone else and did my work better than everyone else, that was all that mattered. So do not be like I was. I tell everyone, like, I've been there and I know the perils and the impact that it had on my career and my self-confidence, because like we've been talking about, when you're trying to be what you're not, you never feel good and you're never motivated to go anywhere. And I think Karen wanted to piggyback on, when looking for a new job, I often ask, or when clients come to me and say, help me get ready to interview, and there's comments like, I need to straighten my hair, or I can't wear this because it's too loud, or I need to hide my tattoos or take out my nose ring. My question to them always is, do you want to interview and get into a culture you feel like you have to change yourself to be accepted? If you do, cool, like what's your non-negotiable? If this is questioning your non-negotiable, then don't do it. But if you're fine with blow drying your hair to feel like you need to get into the job and you're okay with it, great. But just let's think about, are you doing the things are you going to be in a place that you want to be? Or are you just doing this to get the job?
Excellent. Excellent. Amy, Kristen, anything to add?
I can just say that I similarly was probably not practicing what I'm preaching now as a younger manager working in the corporate world, where I didn't really get the value of personal branding. Wasn't really paying much attention to that. I liked my job. I liked what I was doing. But then what happened for me is I was inside this organization. I was doing really well. I sort of just got a lot of opportunities and it was great. But then I started to feel this like inauthenticity, kind of like, all right, I'm not really fully fulfilled. And so I started doing a lot more work on my personal values. What are my personal values, really? And when I did that work, I kind of got to this point where it was really clear to me that growth was one of my most important personal values, that I wanted to always feel like I was always growing, always learning, that sort of thing. Well, I've been in this company for like 20 years and I just realized like that's what it is. I need to do more. I want to challenge myself more. So that's when I really didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I wasn't getting growth. And I had the opportunity and privilege to be able to quit my job and decide to do something different and just let my faith be a little stronger than my fear and take a leap and start something new. And it's been working out great for me. And I feel the difference, right? I feel like so present and comfortable in what I'm doing now, because it does align with my personal value and my personal brand.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And that directly aligns with what you were talking about, Amy, in terms of really getting in touch with your uniqueness and what gives you fulfillment. When are you at your best, you're most engaged? And one of the things I love about that story, Kristen, is one of the key messages from my perspective is that's an example of some really meaningful value that can come out of really spending the time and truly understanding your personal brand. For you, it resulted in having the courage to make a career change and to be doing something that's even more directly aligned with what you innately do best and are most fulfilled doing. It's pretty powerful. Yeah. I have to comment on another wonderful point that Kevin made. I recommend framing your mindset as sharing what I've learned, what I know to be true, how I can help, what I've learned from my mistakes, what I've learned from my failures, etc., versus self-promotion. It's not just semantics, it's a mindset. Excellent, excellent point. There's a reason, Kevin, I've asked you to be a panelist on an upcoming Power Speaking Live event. That's just great. It's about that mindset. So, something I think we all agree with, and certainly the researchers substantiate this, it's one thing to understand your brand, to communicate your brand. You also have to be certain that your brand is telling a compelling story. Do you have any advice on how you develop that narrative, how you develop your personal brand story?
I love that topic. And I think, there's two types of personal brand story. One is the one that everybody tends to think of, right? What's the elevator pitch about who you are, what you do, and how that brings value to other people? And I love that comment earlier about how do you share that without being so salesy. The other type of storytelling is being ready to share examples of how who you are, your uniqueness, and your contributions makes a difference in different situations. And I think of this especially for people who are doing a career change or entering a new, we've been doing some work with veterans, for example, transferring their tremendous years and years of experience serving in the military, but then when they try to go into a corporate environment where it's not obvious on the surface how those different skills translate. I had a similar experience in my own early career coming from an educational background into a corporate environment. You almost want to hide. I even had a mentor advise me, like, don't talk about teaching students and stuff because it makes you look less corporate. But there was one moment where I was at this lunch in a government contracting situation where we wanted to bid for contracts that involved a lot of video training early in the video training days. And they had a videographer, they had a web designer, but they didn't have someone who knew how to actually create content for the videos. And so I was the most junior person at the table. And as I could see that people weren't offering things up, I said, well, I've directed a middle school play. And you know, they're like, well, tell me, what do you need? Like, you need a script, you need a set, you need a prop list, you need this and that. And they said, can you do those things? And I said, yes. And they said, great, we're putting you down as the lead designer bidding for that, right? And it led to my first big promotion in a corporate environment. If I had sat there thinking that my experience and my impact is irrelevant, I wouldn't have had the courage to tell that little story. And these stories are an example, again, like Kevin said, of they're sharing things of what you can bring. And so a lot of times it's our own limitations against ourselves that get in the way. And so listen to the stories you're telling yourself, and ask other people how you've made a difference for them or in different settings if it's not intuitively clear to you.
Great, such great advice. In addition to the assessment you talked about, getting input from those that you're really close to and know you well helps to look at it from that perspective as well. Thank you for sharing that. Building on something Kevin said about learning from mistakes, a lot of the experts say that failure is actually a critical component to really cultivating and being in touch with your brand. What's your reaction to that?
You know, I think failure is one of the best things that can happen to a person, honestly, like on every level. You know, when something doesn't go right the way that you wish that it had, it's just such a quick learning, you know, it's immediate. Right? It's like learning to ride a bike. I tell people, like, the failure is such a good thing. You learn to ride a bike by, like, you just fall a lot, right? You fall a lot and you figure out how to course correct and get it back up there, and then, you know, you're on your way. So I think yes, I mean, I love failure. How it relates to branding, you know, it's the same thing, I guess, right? You're just kind of like figuring out, well, that didn't land the way I wanted it to land. Or maybe, you know, what I see a lot of, I feel like behavior is so important, right? We can't just state our brand. Like, we can't say, I want to be seen as a leader who's very open to lots of people's opinions, and say that out loud. And then in meetings, my team offers ideas and I'm like, no, I don't like that one. No, you know, no, that's not, we'll go with mine, you know, right? Behaviors matter, and every behavior is what people are watching, right? It's like the thing that we say about parenting, do what I say, not what I do. And we all know that's BS, right? Like, they do what you do. They're watching what you do. So remembering how important behaviors are, and you can't just have a lovely written personal brand and then not actually behave that way.
Exactly. It's back to that consistency. What you communicate better support your actions. If not, the actions are going to speak volume. And I think this concept of failure, another key component that ties it to branding in my experience, is the way in which you tell your story. It's really important to be open and vulnerable and sharing some of your failures and missteps, because that makes you more relatable. That makes you more credible. That makes you more authentic. And authenticity has been a theme throughout. Speaking of which, Beverly says, my authentic brand is a representation of who I am, what I believe, and what matters most to me. Whenever I've tried to craft a brand on what I think others want to see, it's a fail. Absolutely. It has to be true to yourself. That reminds me, Morgan, of how you define developing your personal image. Authentically appropriate. Yeah. Authentically appropriate. Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. Let's
I would
go
just
ahead,
say, like
Kristen.
what Amy said, like, so many times we look external instead of internal, you know, and our kids are doing that today, right? They just look so external, and we need to, like, reflect. Yeah.
Exactly. On the subject of storytelling, if this is a skill that you're wanting to refine and hone, we're going to drop in chat. We have an upcoming public workshop on this very topic, so I encourage you to check it out. This applies in so many ways in telling your brand story, and in, you know, has countless applications. So we are nearing the end of our time. So to conclude things, would each of you share your parting advice? What's the one nugget you want to leave this wonderful audience with?
I'd say pay rigorous attention to what's right with you and how you can magnify that.
Great. And that aligns with a lot of the comments we heard. Don't be afraid to do you. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Mine is you're worthy of being seen in your fullness, your greatness, your mistakes, your flaws, no matter who you are, no matter your shape, your size, you're worthy of being seen. So dress like it.
You're worthy of being seen. So dress like it. Love it.
Love it. Yeah, and I would just say that, you do have a personal brand, whether or not you are aware of it or not. So just be more intentional about building what you want it to be. Set some time aside, really be intentional about it.
Wonderful. And I would like to add, building on the point you made, Amy, to really spend some time thinking about stories that illustrate and bring your brand to life, and be prepared to use them in the right circumstances. I love some of the comments we're getting. Erin says, I was just having this conversation with my daughter about her college application. We were discussing a story of her struggles and her strengths, what is true about her and not what she thinks the college wants her to write about. Yes, bravo to that. Lauren says, personal branding takes courage. It absolutely does. And if you want to know your brand, ask others. Okay, wow, this has been an extraordinary audience. And the panelists, thank you. Thank you so much. I feel I know a lot about this topic, and I've learned a lot today from your expertise. I thank you for contributing your time. And before we conclude, we're going to share with you the topic for our December Power Speaking Live. This is another topic I'm very excited about. Joining us for this panel are going to be 3 of Power Speaking's master facilitators, who also are actors, and they're going to share with us how they have drawn some of what they've learned through their acting profession into their ability to be an effective facilitator and presenter. It'll be a fun topic for the holidays. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day.